You could have heard this episode 48 hours early on our Patreon, patreon.com/indieheadspodcast. By joining us for as low as $1 a month, you'll receive episodes early and gain access to our Discord server. All of our upcoming episodes will be up on our Patreon 48 hours before it hits our public podcast feeds. But if you're hearing this via our Patreon feed, we thank you so much for your support. We especially want to thank our Real Ones patrons, including Becca NTN, Georgia Mikowski, Alex Grichmanoff, Baby Buko, Josiah Duncan, Jenna LaFleur, Grant McSpooky, Old Man Withers, Jackson Chris, Alex, Matt Kapczynski, Mark Berry, Aaron Hillsamer, Darian Fisher, Gay Horse 420, Cal 50, Mommy I Just Went Boom Boom, Chris Wade, Jacqueline Kataga, Alec Felder, Eraserhead Baby, Selectric, Rob Marino, Dylan, Waffle113, Noah Kurtz, Tony DeSerafino, Maze Farms, and Derek Pemberton. To become a real one, consider supporting us with a $5 a month donation for receive bonus episodes every month and get a shout out at the top of the pod. Anyways though, enjoy the episode.
Hello. Welcome. I've gathered you all here for the first official meeting of the Bende Jesuit, the secret trans cabal that is in the final steps of taking over the Indieheads podcast. We're in the final stages of preparation. Our plan, thousands of years in the making, is just now coming into fruition. We've got the votes. We've taken over the podcast. We've trans the genders. In this episode, the trans girls take over the Indieheads podcast main feed.
Hey, howdy, folks. Welcome to the Indieheads podcast. I am here today with my friends. It is me, Rose. I am hosting this episode for once because no boys allowed. No boys allowed. It's all the trans women on the podcast together at last for an episode, I think. This is our first time with just the four of us.
It is, yeah. And like our first time in a while with even just a few of us.
Really,
like predominantly.
Really, the only reason was just because I was not out come fetch the bolt cutters time, and of course could not possibly talk about that album without obvious reasons. But hey, we're here now. We're on mic. We've taken over the feed. We've hacker voice. I'm in. Like, let's and really, we've been enabled. Is what's happened. Is one of our wonderful patrons has paid us $8 to allow us to take over the podcast by submitting a playlist called "Songs to Trans Your Gender To," which not only is an inspired idea, but also Jenna's playlist is so inspired. Like almost all of these are incredibly unconventional trans choices, but we will discuss how we will read all of these songs as trans, because we're gonna find a way, baby. It's what we do.
It's as if there's anything we've learned, even just talking amongst ourselves, like it's not that hard to find a way. I was thinking about this one, like listening to the playlist. There is this sort of like loose Joseph Campbell logic to like genderfying basically any song.
Yes, I'm glad we're getting like here right away.
Yeah, there is this like transgenders like story circle that you can follow. Like basically, if any song is about not being happy with the way you are currently, boom, gender, baby.
Exactly.
Easy to just slip right
anytime
in there.
Bodies are being mentioned,
Bodies and spaces.
Bodies and spaces.
Goop on Your Grinch should be on one of these. We gotta get songs to trans your gender with Goop on Your Grinch. But no, it's funny because like that's kind of been the mindset that I've always had too, where it's been like basically any time that you have the mindset and the initiative and there is a song that you can adhere to your own sort of feeling of out of placeness, it's a trans song. That's all it takes. That's all that you need. I'd also like to say that, like, thank you, Jenna, for like giving us a playlist where we actually like are rabid with positive emotions instead of torture. Like,
I've been on like half the episodes the last 2 months, and I feel my brain melting. Like, I like the psychobilly songs, but like that was just a breaking point. Like, I was getting mean on that episode.
Yes, this is going to be a positive restorative after last week's a 1.5 hour bullying session of our host, Maddie. Maddie gets a break this week, and this week we get to talk about some nice, good songs. For the most part, there's some of these that I don't connect as much with for reasons we'll get into, I'm sure, and I think all of us have that.
One where I would like to apologize in advance.
I would like to apologize in advance to the city of Washington, D.C. is all I'm going to say about this podcast.
Yeah, I think we all have to apologize to Washington, D.C.
Anyways, we're gonna get right into this playlist and get right into transing some genders.
Yeah, let me hit the button on the first song, which is Rylan by The National from their 2019 album I Am Easy to Find.
Rylan, you should try to get some sun. You remind me of everyone.
No. I was surprised how much I like this as not
a same like
national person. I like it a lot, and I especially like. I mean, like this one's one of the more obvious ones to kind of track on a trans reading, like all the stuff about like playing your part and how it's all this narrative song about a very trans girl named Rylan. That's like a right in the zone. Like I can very much immediately see why this is one of the songs that Jenna picked. There are some that like the reason was obvious, some that are just like I don't even understand this, but hey, good for you. And then there are some that are like didn't get to me right away, but then like crept up on me over time. This is one of the ones that was like very immediate, like, oh, I see why Jenna picked this.
Yeah, it's almost just like explicitly a gender song, which like I'm not familiar with kind of deep cut national lore. I know that this has been like sort of kicking around for 10 years. So like I don't know what the likelihood that Matt Berninger wrote about a trans feminine person in 2010 is, but like it sounds pretty on the nose in a way that I do really like. I remember being struck by the Colbert performance of this song of all things, like around when this album was coming out, having like perpetually sort of dip my toes in the last 3 or 4 national albums without ever like committing whole hog. But I do remember, I didn't even think about the gender component to this at the time. I just remember hearing the song and thinking, oh, this is nice. And yeah, there's like a very clear read to it.
Yeah. This is one where kind of similar to Lily, I had known about this for a while because I have friends who are like diehard national fans and they had been like talking up this song for a while. So again, I don't know what the likelihood that this was intentionally there. And while I'm not personally a fan of the like sound on this album, I do have to say that I think especially kind of why it makes sense on this one is because this is the album of theirs that has a lot of like accompanying female vocals, which I think is something that we'll get into with one of the songs coming up forward. But I feel like that's sort of like gendered interplay in the vocals themselves also kind of lends to the effect that the song is trying to create, where it feels like Berninger's lyrics are kind of themselves in their addressing transcending gender.
Congratulations to Jenna on making the second ever national song I have liked. on picking this.
I'm trying to like count on 2 hands here mentally. Just how many has it been?
I've always been an early national person, is like the period of time where I'm like, okay, I fully can get into the mindset of like this. When you said deep cut national earlier, I was imagining someone that has like my Radiohead knowledge of like deep cuts transferred to the national. And
there are people out there.
Yeah. I know, and I got scared of that person immediately. But I really
they must
do.
drink
I
a lot
really
of
do
wine.
like when the vibe and the instrumental like hit exactly right on a national song. It's amazing. But then when it's not, it's just like such a fine line between that and snoozy. And this is a good one. I understand this being a highlight, but I was tuned out by this album and the album cycle because even though I liked the one, what's the one with the house cover? You know what
Sleep
I'm talking
All
about?
Beast.
Sleep All Beast.
I liked that one of the 2010s national one, but even still, like I've been a little bored by most of their 2010s output. I'm an alligator girl first and foremost, and then also boxer.
I mentioned this in chat, but yeah, no, I'm very much a Sleep Well Beast person. I think because it's the right intersection of when their instrumentals kind of like wake up enough for me, and also kind of still keep the level of like visceral vitriol that they can kind of get to, and I think that kind of hits the sweet spot for me. But I can totally see, because I have listened to a few of those early ones, how that could like especially land.
I'm just a hater through and through. So like this song being nice was just like, oh, this is a pleasant surprise.
You'll love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to be mean about the National just because like they are such like accidental toxic masculine poster boys.
But it's not their fault.
It's not their fault at all, but it does like it can color my feelings sometimes, especially like in regards to the early area, which is maybe why I like it less. I don't know.
I feel like they're one of those bands that constantly gets billed as consistent, and I've never really liked that type, the kind where it's just like, oh yeah, they do this one thing really well pretty regularly. I'm just like, eh.
Well, I think that's my problem, not my problem, but my thing even with like the later stuff is it's almost like too cohesive front to back. It's like if you're going to do the same sound for an hour, like even if I'm on board with the sound, like this is how I felt about Sleep Will Peace. Like, oh, I like a lot of what's happening here, but just inherent to the design of it ends up being a little like in one ear out the other.
Mm-hmm. I will admit I cannot like hum a song from that album, so touche.
I have like that's weirdly the only one that I have like multiple songs from like on the mental Rolodex. So like truly different strokes. But I do want to loop it back around to the gender thing. I think that's to posit sort of an idea of why this one, it seems, is landing with a lot of people, to like speak to Lily's point about like the idea of like the masculinity that is kind of inferred in a lot of their songs. I feel like the sort of like tenderness that like can ascribe itself to a gender thing is probably why it kind of like breaches that, because it gets around and like circumvents that preconception in a sort of way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's very like subverting the expectation of like what the National storytelling is if you base it off of the kind of dude and the kind of jacket that dude wears that usually likes the National. But we like this song. I think this is definitely one of the better ones on the playlist. Somewhere kind of in the middle for me, but pretty good.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Mike Mills, who directed the short film that this album had. Mike Mills, a notable gal's favorite.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Mills.
I haven't seen Come On yet, but I will.
I'm going to bully
come on
all of you once it comes out because I am feral about it. But also Mike Mills, honorary trans ally, noted. So we got shouts out.
King.
All right, second song.
This is one of the biggest ones of the episode in terms of discussion, in terms of just. Oh boy, I'm so glad. Of all time. I'm so glad we get to talk about this.
Yes.
Fucking short king hours, baby.
Yeah.
Song number 2 is, of course, Dancing in the Dark by Bruce Springsteen, T for T anthem, as we will get into.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
For Bruce's whole catalog is T for T.
Oh, absolutely. And I will get into it. But also it's this is to me one of the most like obvious ones in a number of different ways, because one of the things that came up in chat is we were talking about how very few of these songs are like quote unquote dysphoria core, and like I think it was in reference to this song in particular, even though there is the like check my look in the mirror, want to change my clothes, my hair, my face line that is like the biggest one. But I think kind of this one is the poster child for that for me, because there are so many different angles you can come at it with in terms of just needing a sense of like trans community and like dissatisfaction and malaise with like one's life. It really kind of, I think, hits on a number of different angles that I think makes it a very wholly trans song that can't really be reduced to one single thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the sort of like multiplicity it has. Like there are 5 different types of like gendered experiences and gender non-conforming experiences that you could like layer onto it. And it's one of those like magic tricks where someone just happens to like string together a set of words that people can interpret in like 10 different ways.
Yeah, it's easy to have like 1 or 2 lines that are like, oh yeah, this totally reads as like a very trans like line, like you could just paste this into whatever, like a trans song, and it would make sense. But like the whole vibe of this song is just like definitively queer in a way that I love the fact that like there are so many people who own this album and just like have no idea how extremely gay this song is. I mean, like that's one of the great things about Bruce Springsteen. Like him kissing his bandmates is like the most beautiful thing in like rock history to me. And I love how like this song communicates that feeling of like, even if we're dancing in the dark, even if we feel like we're kind of like we can't be open with who we are, like in this intimacy we have with each other, like we have like safety, we have each other, and it's like very, very touching to me. I think the song is great.
Yeah,
sitting around trying to write a book, that's a queer trait.
Pretty sus if you ask me. To bandwagon off that gay point, it's funny that you mentioned it because like literally the Born in the USA cover is a picture of his ass. I'm also going to drop in chat the single art for this if anybody hasn't seen, which is one of the like twinkiest things to ever exist.
I'm so excited.
Oh my god. Listeners at home, Google this.
Yes.
Yeah, that is incredible.
But it's yeah, no, to get to your point, Jackie, it's like one of the things that like really kind of resounds to me, like because I've always kind of for the longest time I've wanted to do like a long like personal essay about like growing up with like a dad who is like really into Bruce Springsteen and having that kind of be like the guiding like light throughout like multiple different gender permutations in my life. But like something that like struck me listening to this for this playlist in a way that like even just listening to it on its own and thinking already it was a trans song didn't, is like the more that I listen to this to prep for it, the kind of refrain of "you can't start a fire without a spark" is just something about that is so intangibly potent in the idea of needing a sense of like initiative, of just kind of you need that push in order to like find the affirmation and comfort that you need, whether it's one within yourself or one within like the people that surround you and are like you. And something about listening to this song a bunch of times in preparation for this episode has just kind of made me feel a like twinge of just absolute like feeling whenever the chorus comes around for that reason.
Yeah, totally.
Just a great fucking song.
It's great. I didn't grow up with like Bruce parents and like Bruce being passed down to me as gospel. Like funny enough, my dad like passed on like the Killers to me as my first band, which are just like ripping off Bruce all the time. So when I discovered Bruce like in adulthood, I was like, oh, like that's who the Killers were just ripping off for all of Sam's Town in a good way. Sam's Town is classic. But I really do like Bruce now, and hadn't got much like deeply into this album though, and so this song, like spending some time with it was a real treat. This is just so good.
Yeah,
I've been into Bruce for a few years now. Like again, I'm not one of those people who like had a long-term connection with him, like as with most music. But
yeah.
like, yeah, just his whole catalog during the like peak run era was like something very special to me. And then I just heard the song. It was just like, this is one of the best songs of all time. Like it's
damn
just
good.
It's just such a ripper. I just love it.
Yeah,
shout out to the boss.
I admit that like I have yet to really take a Bruce deep dive, and like in the little dabbling I've done, like haven't fully resonated with him. I think truly just because culturally there is something so like capital A American about him, and the way he is like playing and has codified himself into that sensibility.
Exactly.
What if I were to tell you,
called an album Born in the USA and stood in front of the American flag?
But I want to like go deep down the Bruce hole at some point, and this is giving me good motivation to do it, because I am also fascinated by this sort of like contemporary like Zoomerfied pseudo queering of him, which like I now am beginning to understand is just like vocalizing what has already kind of like has always been latent within his music, which is very fun. It's like Bruce Springsteen and Clint Eastwood are like the two like capital G guys that like every other cis man my age who is like slightly effeminate are obsessed with. And I want to understand it, even if I don't feel that way myself. It's a very very strange and like loaded phenomenon.
I just saw someone posting about
for.
bridges of Madison County today, so you're exactly correct.
It's funny you mentioned that, Lily, because what if I were to tell you that, yes, like there is the codification of Bruce as like capital A American, but a lot of his like lyricism is specifically subversion of like national ideology in favor of the more sort of like individual elements of working class public against a sort of larger national entity that's bearing down on you.
I'm gonna say something that makes anyone over the age of like 30 very mad at me right now. But Bruce was basically the original Lana Del Rey, but for like dudes. You know, the way that he's using American iconography, and he's not doing it ironically. It's not like he's like, I hate America and this is stupid, but he's also not doing it in the way that people who listen to Born in the USA don't understand that it's like. Mm-hmm. An anti-war, like he occupies that like middle ground that I think is similar to the way that like Lana Del Rey like uses like these cliches and these bits of American iconography in her music. And it's not that she's using it satirically, it's just she's like, let me take this and frame it in like a different kind of way. And that's sort of what Bruce was doing. Is Bruce is like saying like, I'm gonna take these very like capital A American sounds and I'm gonna present them to you in this like more tender, like soulful kind of way that I think resonates with people very strongly, because he just is good about writing about vulnerable communities of all types. Like the same kind of empathy that he has for like working class people like translates very well to like queer readings of these songs, because he's just like a very empathetic person, and not just always like we were just talking about Mike Mills. Like it's the same sort of thing. It's like
right.
Any people that are like in that kind of humanist vein, like it's going to be easier to do trans or queer readings of it.
Oh yeah, and to be clear, like that is what I meant, is that like I was referring to sort of like the specific way he plays with that iconography.
No, exactly.
Not
like,
just like
that's
reiterating the iconography itself.
That's also why like Lana Del Rey hits for me different as an LA girl. Like of course,
the amount of like screaming.
Lana is LA brain, Bruce is New Jersey brain.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, I mean, basically the same reason I don't fully connect with Bruce Springsteen is the same reason I don't fully connect with First Cow. It's just, it's playing with a thing that is not necessarily within my heritage, but I do get it.
I realized that when I raised that point, I, for whatever reason, had spaced out and forgotten that you were the sole Canadian in this chat.
We're gonna come up. By the way,
I was about to say we're gonna discuss the exact inverse of this later.
Exactly.
But to bandwagon off of people talking about their Bruce experiences, to delve into mine a little bit more, kind of the funny thing about mine is that like, because like I mentioned, my dad religiously is a Bruce fan, and it would be like the thing he would play most. He like talked about Bruce all the time, and like as a child who did not yet know she was a girl, I like had always at the time thought that I was beyond it, save for like a few songs, because you know how it is when you are like a child who's like my parents are playing their music that I just can't connect to, and it was really only like once I had started transitioning that I'd started kind of going into the catalog and being like, oh, there is stuff here that is like not only just admirable on a craft level, but also just really deeply hitting me as I'm like considering my gender in this particular way. And that comes down to a lot of like sort of identification with certain aspects of like, say, butch femininity and that sort of thing. But also like one of the most fun things, especially with like the earliest Bruce albums, I'm talking like Wildest and E Street Shuffle and Born to Run, is that they can be like read almost all the way through as like trans albums, especially the former one of those. I've started to, part of the reason it's become like one of my favorites is because I've started to take on a reading of it wherein like most of the central figures on the album are just similar to 20th century women, important women in Bruce's life, which like, let's unpack that, why you're attached to all of these women, not all of whom you actually have like romantic relationships with, but are just like figures peripheral to your life. And I also want to shout out, just because we had mentioned it in chat, that I have to shout out the other most trans Bruce Springsteen song, which is Rosalita (parentheses come out tonight), which is entirely, I am and I have become fully convinced it's about him being supportive of a trans girl whose parents dislike her transition and anybody who is supportive of her transition, which is why they dislike Bruce. And that is basically the song, and it rules in that context.
Yeah, exactly. Like, as we were talking about up top with like our sort of like trans hero's journey model, you know, like a lot of Bruce Springsteen songs appear to be about, you know, this sort of conflicting relationship with, you know, an oppressive figure or sort of like system, you know, that causes you to feel like very ambivalent and conflicted towards yourself. And, you know, that could be either the human body or the New Jersey industrial complex. Like,
I do like how we're talking about it like it's the subject of like a fucking Angela Davis theory text.
Yes, this song is important. We simply have to over intellectualize this song. We can't not.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, speaking of over intellectualizing things and
time for Jackie to talk for 20 minutes.
I'm gonna keep it brief, hopefully. But right now we are gonna listen to a little bit of Something Comforting by Porter Robinson, which is the third song on this playlist. Yeah, this is the most trans song on the album, first of all, so that was just the correct pick right there. I really want to be careful when I talk about this and in general my relationship with this song, because I'm writing an entire album of the year essay right now about this album, partly about this, so like I'm gonna try A, not to talk too much, but B, also just like you'll read that and I'll get into it. But basically, like, I try not to project entirely onto Porter Robinson, because like his songs, more than almost anyone else I listen to, are like so apt for trans readings. I mean, the first time I fucking heard Sea of Voices and the lines like, we'll see our spirits come undone, and like all the lyrics of like your body melting into spirits, I'm like, egg me had my mind absolutely fucking shattered by that song. And so Porter Robinson has always been someone that, like, even before I had the words to describe it or before I like came out, it was someone that I always associated with like my transness and like that thing that I couldn't like articulate to people. And so there was something so like surreal and beautiful about Porter Robinson after this like long period of writer's block, like coming out of nowhere with this album that literally came out. And I forgot this and I double checked it to look last night. This album literally came out the day I came out as trans. Like,
holy shit.
It was at 9 p.m. that night is when the album finally dropped. Like, and I had already heard this single before because the album rollout for this was like a year plus, which it was a pandemic, I get it, but also it was a long rollout. But this song came out, and yeah, immediately, first of all, like I listened to the album that night in obviously the most tender emotional mood possible, and so this album like hit immediately for me right away. But there's just something that I love so much about the fact that the first album is this album that's all about like escapism and about using like fictional worlds and like anime and video games or whatever, but just like imagining worlds that are not our own and fantasy worlds to like escape reality and to like escape your body, which is I was the kid that read every single fucking magic, fantasy, science fiction. I read like those Warriors books where it's like about cats that like think and all that stuff, like totally normal cis guy stuff. Anyways, but I was like really, really, really obsessed with anything like magic and like, which is why the Harry Potter shit sucks ass. But that obsession was like something that I very much connected with worlds like so much, and the way that like it interpolated like video gamey kind of like artificial like beautiful landscape sounds. And like this album is the more mature, like finely honed version of it, but it's also like the more emotionally mature version of the album. It's the album that's him like finally like coming to grips with like a lot of insecurity and self-doubt and learning to like exist in the real world and be like having your feet on the ground and being able to like take a deep breath and finally feel like you're not trying to get away from something. And Something Comforting is the first song that he wrote from the album that started like in the middle of a 2-year depression from like 2015 to 2016, where he like didn't write any music at all and was like he was like saying like, I thought that I might never make music again, that I'd just be like, I'm done. And he wrote like one little part of this song that years later he came back to and stretched out a little more and then came back to it. And then like by 2017, 2019, when he was actually starting to make progress on the album, he like basically put this song together. And like the little vocal hook, do 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 do, that little like melody thing was like the very first thing he came up with, that he was like, okay, I can keep this, like this is good enough for me to put on the album. And it's definitely the song that's the most in the world style with the Vocaloid vocals, which is the real trans part of this song and Porter's music in general, which the inspiration for that, the story behind it, is the first song that he did it on is Sad Machine, which is like one of the first songs Porter ever sang on before. And originally it was going to be all featured guests on the World's album, like all these like indie bands and Bastille type dance indie type bands, but like he ended up doing the vocals for that himself. One of them was himself not pitched up, and then the other one was like him run through like a Vocaloid processor. And he said like I had to like drink a couple of beers to like get up my courage to sing on record, because he was like very not confident in his voice. Question mark. Anyways, but basically that leads to this sound that is on Sad Machine, which is like the thing that makes Porter Robinson's music go absolutely fucking crazy, and it makes like the stand-um that includes Me, Begin, that proceeds all the way to this new album 7 years later, and Something Comforting, which is definitely the most like I said, it comes from that period of time when he was like really going through it. So it's definitely like the least settled song on the album. It's the most like in the state of, I mean, the whole Getting made me want, oh my god, I'm gonna let you guys talk soon now, because I could keep going for so long about this. This is why I'm writing for the site. Please share your thoughts, everyone.
I absolutely have a lot in this too. So to like, as a counter perspective, before this playlist, I'd never listened to anything that Porter Robinson had done, and I actually hadn't listened to Nurture yet this year because I've been very neglectful about 2021 listening. But
same. Just gonna chime in and say that now.
But yeah, no, something about this, like when I did my first listen to this playlist last night, it kind of, the immediate effects of it did strike me, but it was really, I was listening to this again in the car on my commute this morning, and like something in me kind of like broke just listening to this and like honing in on certain lyrical passages and like production decisions, just because I think very similarly to what we're talking about with Dancing in the Dark, I think there are a lot of different angles of transness that can be read into this in terms of like personal attachment. Just right off the bat, this sort of opening couplet of "If I send this void away, have I lost a part of me?" is like something that I know I really, really deeply feel as sort of a feeling that led to me like clinging on to things in my life that were actually hurting me for years before transitioning. Like that is a big fucking mood of just worrying that like you're going to do something irreversible to yourself. And then that hook that Jackie is talking about of getting made you want more, hoping made you hurt more, is to me like the way that I kind of personally kind of make sense of this song and like read it through my own kind of personal lens, is that like to me that feels like sort of a conversation between yourself pre-transition and this self that you know is on the other side of it, and this sort of feeling of, if I give in to like a little piece of it, like am I going to like given more, and if I like hope too much about it without really doing anything, am I going to hurt the idea of that self that is like waiting off in the distance more? And the specifically the thing that did break me is kind of similarly to the Rylan vocals, the sort of switching between gendered modes of singing, especially in the last like minute of the song, where it's kind of breaking and switching like with almost every other word, is just for whatever reason that like ruined me when I was listening to it today, as sort of this, it to me kind of feels like when you are trying to break through to yourself and get to that like that self that is off in the future, in the distance, and something either isn't taking, or it's you're holding back against it and it's breaking through regardless. There's like a few different like ways that I've like been thinking about it all day, and like no matter what, this sort of idea of these two different periods of self that are kind of fighting for control over the same body and the same sentiments is like it was utterly devastating to me when I was like thinking about it in that lens.
This song fucks me up so much. Like from the minute he opens the Nurture live show with an intro, the Lifelike song, right into this song, which is just like one of the many war crimes that was committed against me that weekend. But the song just like it devastates me so much. But the thing about this that I really want to be clear about, even though I do like have an eyebrow raised about this, like I genuinely don't want to speculate about Porter whether these, and like that's totally irresponsible. But for most of these songs, it's like, oh, these are like unconventional trans readings of songs. These are just the most like trans girl ass lyrics I've ever heard in my entire life. But the thing is just that the thing that I think makes this album work so well, and the reason why this album has been so successful as like a crossover album, is like what makes all great songwriting good, which is that this song I think primarily is inspired by like Porter as like a musician and an artist feeling at this period of stuckness, and like all of the stuff he's talked about, like how his career arc basically started as him becoming this hit DJ at 18 years old, literally got offered a gig so early that like the very first gig he got offered, someone was like, hey, can you come to Portland to DJ? He's like, sure, let me just buy a plane ticket and learn how to DJ, because I've never done that before. So like that's how much he was just, and then he was signed by Owsla at 18 as Skrillex's first, like, this is going to be my new protege. So from the minute he was just like fast tracked into this meat grinder that is the EDM industrial complex that made him like hate himself and his art, and he tried to break out of that with this album Worlds that immediately got him this like cult fandom and people who like really understood it, but like did not get a lot of critical love. Got famously a 6 from Anthony Fantano, which is geniusly included into the visuals of Nurture, which made me laugh really hard. But like basically he was at this period where he was just like, I took a step in the right direction, but he was still like really not confident in like where his art was going and whether he could really do what he wanted to do. And so this album is so beautiful in not only how it like documents that, but like the thing that makes it special is that there's so many like pop albums this year that were like that are these like celebrity artists basically having these introspective like it's similar to the Billy album in a lot of ways. Like I think about them very similarly in the way, but the thing that makes both of them work is that they don't feel alienating to like non-rich celebrities. Like there's so much in both Nurture and in Happier Than Ever that is like very accessible and very easy to project onto, because what he does is take these very specific personal things he's going through about his life and his art and his music, and he's making them so like accessible and emotional palette by tapping into like what is the essential like human feeling that I'm feeling from the stuff that I'm going through in my life, and how do I put that into like these songwriting lyrics. And I think that's what makes Something Comforting so easy for trans readings. Is just it's a song that is so vulnerable and so clearly about like wanting to be some way that you cannot find, and like basically him feeling like I'm getting all these things that everyone's telling me that are supposed to make me happy, and it's making me feel miserable. Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, I'm doing things the way that everyone told me I was supposed to do them, and I'm not happy at all. Like, how do I break out of this cycle? And that's like exactly the feeling from like right pre-transition that like I totally connect to with this song, where I was just like at a stage in my life where I didn't want to do, not only didn't feel like I could do things that were even a little bit hard, and I couldn't do things that required like a lot of effort from me, but even the things that I loved to do, that I was passionate about, and like seeing friends and loved ones, like I just stopped wanting to do, and how empty that made me feel and all of that. And like that's what this song like taps into. But then this whole album is about like overcoming that, and I think this is the one song on the album that's like kind of the fuck me up song, but also like there is something like hopeful about the way that all of this is presented. And I really think that this song just especially like resonated with me super duper hard from the first moment I heard it.
Yeah, to speak.
So you were saying about like this being a popular pop crossover. I noticed another detail, which I think was the reason for it being a big pop record. So I want you to look at the cover carefully. Do you notice what Porter is wearing? In contrast to other pop songwriters this year, Porter is wearing a pair of jeans.
Oh my god. Hashtag get Lord some damn jeans.
Get Lord some jeans.
We need to get Lord some jeans. We need to get the Haim sisters some shirts. We need to get these celebrities some clothes, people.
But to very briefly touch on what you're saying, Jackie, I think that's kind of, to me, that's kind of the appeal of like a lot of this playlist itself, is that like only a few of these songs are like explicitly about like trans stuff, in that they either talk about like trans artists who are out talking about their own experiences, or like singing about specific elements to like what living as a trans person is like. And like a good chunk of the rest of these kind of have these sort of universalities to them that are not so vague as to be unfamiliar or distant, but also are just kind of like open enough that because they're capturing these specific feelings, it leaves room for people to imprint their kind of own experiences and feelings that are like tantamount to whatever that person is going through in it onto those songs. And like for trans women, that's the feelings of like all these feelings about like yourself, your the way you put yourself out in the world, and like the person that you are. So like I think that's one of the big strengths here, is that it really kind of writes into that abstract universality well.
Totally. And then the other thing that really like hits me in the emotional level is just like the sonics of this song, and the way that all of Porter's music does this thing where it manages to like remind me, like obviously he's being inspired by video game music and anime music, but like this album does it in such a more tasteful way, I feel like, than World, even as someone who loves like the kind of sugar-coated colors and brightness of Worlds and like the EDM stuff in that. And there's still like some of that here, but I think, like I said, it's all like so much more grounded in like the real world, and like the whole iconography of the single art and the album art, which is totally reflected in the visual language of the live show, which is completely different from the last one. Like the big thing for me as a Porter stan that I have to communicate to people is go see him live if you get the chance, because it's not just like, oh, you get to see the songs from the album live. It's like full on DLC, where like the live show is its own separate experience that like, I talk about Porter shows the way that fucking jam band people talk about that stuff, because it really is like such a communal experience. I have friends from around the country that are just like Porter freaks like myself, who I've met like backstage at shows and stuff. And like, we all have this super emotional connection to the music, because it's pulling on such like not only these universal big like emotions and these like synth pop references like M83 and stuff that's like very like easily accessible, but it's also pulling on like video game music and like stuff that just reminds me of childhood in this very specific way that I can't even like process. And so combining that with this album that is also about like the version of me that was inside me as a young child, like literally blossoming into like an adult who can like feel like they can exist in the world and be themselves. Like that's what makes this album so special to me, is that it like bridges the gap between like the person I was and the person I am now in this really beautiful way. And I just it's so good. I'm so happy that Porter made an album that other people like, so I'm just not on Porter Island. It's wonderful. Like the moment I heard it, I was like, yes, this is gonna take. The Fantanos are gonna like this one. Not that we need their approval, but you know what I mean.
It feels nice.
Yeah. Even if somebody's like not a big EDM head, this album really hit me a lot. Like I think the stuff on the first half of it is a little bit more for my taste, especially like the song "Musician," which is
banger.
Straight up my favorite song of the year. Like that one just hit me just right. I was just like, that's sweet.
It's so good.
Yeah, I can attest to that thing about the live shows, by the way. I woke up with the Jackie thesis in my notifications the day after she saw that show.
He's one of the only people who watched Alive 2007 and took notes. Like he actually took away the lessons, and the lessons were not just LED screen. There were more important lessons that Porter understands, and the way that these songs are like not only live versions of the songs that have different interpolations to them, but just also just like recontextualized, like with all the visuals and stuff. It's really lovely. And the visual person that works with Porter Robinson, Ghost Dad, is a hero of mine. He does incredible work. Anyways, don't let me talk about Porter Robinson more. Move on.
No, we shouldn't.
Just again, I would like to apologize to the city of Washington, D.C. I would like to apologize to Discord Records. I would like to apologize to Ian Mackay. Yes.
And Jenna. I would like to apologize to Jenna.
I would like to apologize to our patron who sent us this playlist. Next up is Rend It by Fugazi.
So even like it, I have neutral feelings on this song, but I do appreciate its place in the playlist because I think everyone sort of has their like eggy hardcore band that they go to, or like eggy, ugly on purpose guitars band that sort of becomes a source of comfort for them. I was a slint transsexual myself. So it's just you gotta have one on every true gender playlist. The one that is just throwing the guitars at the wall.
I have no judgment for this song's inclusion on the playlist. I just don't. I would go ahead and venture myself the least punk member of the podcast, and especially not like East Coast punk. Like there's some West Coast pop punk stuff that like I do connect with just from being here, but like this sort of like East Coast hardcore stuff that's like classic like this, like this is one of the first Fugazi songs I've ever listened to, and this is not making me want to listen to more Fugazi songs. It's not just like that the production is like we talked about before, like there's no reason for us to harp on like, oh, the production of this doesn't sound good because they recorded it on a tin can in the 80s. Like, yeah, of course it doesn't sound good. That was like the point. But like I just don't like the riffs, the melody, what the vocal dude is doing. I just really found and then the whole part where like the whole instrumental cuts out and there's and it's just the vocals. I was like, oh, this is what other people must hear when they listen to the Gremlin bands that I like and say that like this is not for them. like this is very much not my cup of tea as far as dudes shouting and not knowing how to sing, which I do like. So it's not like I'm opposed to this conceptually. It just didn't really land with me, unfortunately.
The very telling reference to Ian Mackay as the vocal dude.
Yeah, that was all you needed to know.
Venues that would get you like chased out of on a rail.
Oh yeah, like that's what I love talking about hardcore on the internet, because I know that anyone
kids be like
I know that anyone, if they knew like me talking about that, would like actually shoot me. And so I think that it's what I like about getting into hardcore is to piss off actually guys. It's like I know enough about the stuff that is pulling from this music that I don't have to, like, I understand that their place in music history is important, and I'm not going to like disrespect that, but like there are DC punk bands now that I like a lot. Like I love Priests, and I love like stuff that is like the new queer like version of this. But personally, I was unable to find any trans way. I didn't really dig much into the lyrics. I probably should.
The lyrics
Look,
I actually
Jackie.
do really like. I see a lot of like, I get how if this is your sound, you would have a lot to connect to in these lyrics. Like again, it does also fulfill that like obligatory sort of like spot in any good like gender anthem playlist of the like, is someone please make my body not a thing song.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Jackie, if you're not pissing off hardcore cis dudes, what are you even doing? Like, what are you're failing as a person?
I had a man
true.
tell me to listen to real hardcore today. I'm doing my part.
Thank you, Rose. But no, to bandwagon off of what Lily is saying, that is the kind of thing that I attach to, because like the lyrics themselves, I think, are the strongest part of this song, which I don't personally particularly vibe with. But also, like Lily's saying, the whole sort of chorus of this is talking about being locked in a body and describing all the ways of wanting to kind of destroy it or like render it into something new. And it's kind of in love with the thought of like bodily destruction as a means of escape in some kind of way, which like I totally see why this fits, and it definitely serves the place that it does, especially because like to also bandwagon off a point that was made, I feel like other punk bands, it's kind of sometimes harder to kind of dig into that particular aspect. My kind of like eggy punk band of choices, I was a very like Bad Brains trans egg kid, so I can't condemn the city of Washington DC because it gave us that, but
yeah, even as like maybe the most punk-pilled person in this call, I've just never clicked with Fugazi. It's never been my thing. Like, surprisingly, of all the things, like Ian MacKay's like late period bands have been the ones I've been like, yeah, this is cool, like the Evens and Corky. But Fugazi is just like never hit for me. I've always just been like, it's okay. And this song, like,
they're the ones that have the
like,
picture of them in
the
basketball hoop, right? That's Fugazi. That's that band where the guy's in the basketball hoop. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
Okay.
I thought you were going to mention there is a famous picture of Fugazi, and that was not it.
Oh, well,
maybe that is an actual picture of Fugazi. But...
No, yeah, it's a picture of them performing at like some like school gymnasium where I believe it's Ian MacKay is like inside of the like hoop of the basketball, like upside down. But yeah, there.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's what I think of when I think of Fugazi, is that picture.
I think of, unfortunately, the double whammy of the Hard Times Tiny Hats and Ian MacKay doing interviews articles just did so much damage to Fugazi's legacy.
A good clickhole article can just really poke a balloon in your band's.
It really can.
By the by, there is one part of the lyrics, and specifically the Genius page, that I forgot to mention, which is just the only note about the song is playing it live. Picciotto introduced it simply as, quote, a song about perversion, which I think all of us trans gals can relate to.
Oh, definitely.
Perverts rock.
Yeah. Perverts rock.
A lot of those. I mean, I'll just come out and say it, like my pervert song about not wanting to be in your body, obviously Dream of What You Would Do to Me by Ada Rook. Like,
of course.
I was gonna say Doctor by Priest is a good one, but there's a couple Priest songs I was thinking about that have trans reads.
I love that Priest album,
definitely.
Bodies and Spaces.
Bodies and Spaces and Goops and Grinches.
I just listened to a lot of Bomb the Music Industry songs about hating to be alive.
I mean,
which thankfully, that's another good punk outlet. That's like a band who carried on the spirit to a degree that I resonate a lot more with than like actual Fugazi is like bands who carried on Fugazi's ideas.
I think
you wanna get into the guys who took the original thing and like made it good. The original guys, a lot of the time, big minefield there.
Yes.
I'm sure the Fugazi guys are mostly fine.
I was going to, under any circumstances, gotta hand it to Gen X and Boomer punks.
I was gonna say, as long as we were talking about like pervert songs, like there is the in terms of like body destruction, there's the, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's the one like Twinkle Park song where she's talking about like how much she like wants to make a change, and there's like an offhand lyric about how all she's trying to do is just trying to get off, and then like immediately apologizes for it in the lyrics, which is that's a trans mood, just accidentally disclosing that just because you're frustrated.
That's every girl's rituals song. That's like all of Mom 4.
To make my promised last Porter comment of the episode before we can move on, is that Porter, the actual lyric from Sea of Voices I was trying to remember that ends the song and is the only lyrics of the song is, we will see creation come undone, these bones that bound us will be gone, we'll stir our spirits till we're one, then softest shadows will become. That is the most trans Bandcamp thing I've heard in my life. I'm sorry, it just is. And that's why I loved it immediately and was like, I am going to become a stan of this person. And that's the journey I've been on to here. Anyways, that's it. No more Porter. I've been banned.
Do we have anything else to say about Rend It, or
DC wants us to move on? Let's move on. Sorry, Jenna. All right, next song is Ezra Furman, Maraschino-Red dress, $8.99 at Goodwill. I was not familiar with Ezra's stuff before this, but I knew that. Rose, is it playing?
No, I haven't started. I just came back.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay,
all right.
So here is Maraschino-Red dress.
Yes, I had never listened to Ezra Furman's stuff before this, and this was nice. I liked it a lot. I know they do the music for is it Sex Education?
Yep.
Is the show? Yeah. This is just neat, and obviously one of the easier songs on the playlist to do a trans read of.
Oh yeah.
Totally.
Well, it's also because she is like, as we mentioned, one of the people who like is most vocal about being trans that we are talking about. In that, like, I believe we only have 2 out trans artists on this playlist, but
only 2.
But I believe most Ezra Furman experienced member of this. This song kind of occupies a really fascinating space on this album. Just because the entire album is, for the most part, this conceptual piece envisioning a sort of like post-apocalyptic America that was like very obviously written like post 2016 election, where like she and her lover, who is a literal angel, are like on the run, like doing this like kind of road trip as like people fleeing from these kind of forces out to get them. And like this song kind of occupies like an interesting space in the album because it is one of the more kind of mundane ones. It's a very sort of mundane experience and kind of situation that I feel like is very identifiable, of being so kind of displeased with your own body and appearance that you're like neglecting to attend to different needs, whether like actual like human needs or like theological like religious needs, like for your own like spiritual well-being, in order to kind of shelter yourself away because you can't take like being out there, and going to like get this one sort of marker of kind of embracing your gender is itself kind of a fraught experience because you're worried about like how other people are going to view you, how you're kind of being perceived. And like I'm kind of torn sometimes about like whether I prefer this album or 12 Nudes, which is the follow-up, just because I think both of them are doing very interesting kind of different things about how they talk about transness. This one is definitely viewing it as more of a kind of interior forces versus exterior forces sort of album, whereas 12 Nudes, which I have written an album of the year piece for, is very much more about like the sort of often conflicting elements of like what it means to be a trans person, and all these sorts of ideas of like how you can reconcile like your own kind of like tenderness and like raw emotional feelings of yourself versus all the sort of like things bubbling outside you that are like causing you to feel rage and injustice at like how the world treats trans people and how it lacks the space for you. So it's this is very much like a part, I would say, of what kind of her catalog is all about. And I think it is probably one of the better songs to like pull for kind of talking about transness in that vein, I would say.
Yeah, I mean the lyric about looking over my shoulder at the register, that's just like that is the quintessential trans experience. Like everyone can connect to that. There's no hard way into it for us.
The number of early transition days I spent in like Goodwill thrift shops in like the crust punkiest parts of like Alston in Massachusetts, while like still semi-closeted. I feel that intensely.
Yeah, that's like almost where I struggle with this song, is it so vividly illustrates like those kind of like early transition experiences that like it's almost impossible for me to listen to, because it just brings me back to that place that I definitely like do not want to go back to, which is good. That's good songwriting, Ezra, that you made me feel that so viscerally, but also is like not a space I want to go back to very often, if at all.
That's like me trying to listen to the Ada Rook album when I was that early in transition and just being like, I am not ready for these vibes yet. I will be soon, but I'm not ready for them now.
Vibes. You are not at the correct level.
Yeah,
exactly.
Which I think is also,
I needed to take a certain number more estrogen pills to unlock the vibe.
Yeah, which is also, I think, maybe an important dynamic to note, and also like an important thing to note generally. And what I like about these songs that Jenna has selected is they do like cover a very like wide spectrum of like places you can be within your relationship to your own gender. And I think like all four of us largely are in like somewhat distinct spaces in that regard. And so it's very interesting, like the sort of spectrum of also like what is hitting most for us based off like where we are at. And I don't know if any of us are still in like the Goodwill phase necessarily, but still like I think our read of this song can maybe depend on like the degree of distance we have to sort of, you know, what I can only describe as capital T, like that time in all of our lives.
Yeah, I feel that intensely just because like when this album came out in, I want to say like 2018, I was still like at the stage of like feeling like I was getting more of a grip on like what I even considered my gender was, but also still kind of like pre-HRT, like fully kind of accepting like the most like feminine parts of myself and kind of like dipping my toes in a like, well, maybe if I try like these feminine clothes that will like help me out. So like when this album came out, I feel like this sort of thing was like hitting me exactly where I was at the time. So I totally get that, Lily.
All right. Well, I don't have much more to say about this one. If we want,
yeah, very good song. It actually got me to check out the full album for this the other day, because I was just like, this rocks.
Yeah, I want to do a full Ezra Furman deep dive. Like, most of my familiarity with her is like through Natalie's writing on her, which has been very compelling. And so, you know, again, it's one of those things where one day I'll go for it, because it seems like there's, you know, quite a lot there.
Oh yeah.
Okay, next up, the second best song with thunder in the title that we've ever covered on this podcast.
Wait, what's the first one? Is this a reference I'm missing?
Oh my fucking
Are you freaking?
What am I blanking on?
Lily, you were on the episode. No, Lily, you were on the episode.
Thunder, feel the thunder, lightning in the thunder.
Oh, right.
Car commercial music.
Genuinely completely forgot about that song.
That was this year, right? That was
that was the beginning of this year. Listen, the car commercial series put all of us in a fugue state. We don't want to go back to.
Oh my god. That was
put me in a fugue and a fugue.
That was about 2-3 months before I came out, and like 6 months before I started HRT, and like that was just peak mental illness time for me. And so all of my actions during the car commercial series, including and not limited to the Pistol Manifesto, I cannot be held liable.
Similarly, I would like to say, like, I got dumped like 2 weeks before I recorded Thunderdome. Please never do anything like that again.
I love that. I was in a similar space where I was like, the first 3 months of the year were like the bad times for me, and so like literally everything that happened during that span is just like completely lost to me because it feels like a different person was
It's
there.
all been bad times. Can you tell?
Yeah, I was in a few. Weirdly, I think of like that period as like the good times within the bad times, where I was like no longer being kept alive by a tube, but also like not fully doing that either. Very mixed emotions. Oh, I can't believe I forgot about Thunder.
Anyways,
I guess it was just so obvious to me. We're not talking about Thunder. We're talking about a different kind of Thunder.
And not just any Thunder, but like, yeah, you know, an ongoing one, a lengthened one, I guess, a continuous Thunder by Japandroids.
Yes.
Things of that nature.
Yes. Now we entered the Canadian corner of the episode, as previously discussed.
Hell yeah. Just as like it is impossible to fully understand Bruce Springsteen if you have not been to New Jersey, the way in which like whatever frequency the Japandroids emanate just like is what being in Western Canada feels like. There's no way for any of their songs not to hit me in like a very deep place emotionally. And I will say, I teased this like in the chat before, but on my first listen through this playlist, I had not listened to Japandroids in so long that like hearing those particular like celebration rock chords caused me to like violently burst out crying immediately, just from like the sheer power of the whist. This song hit me in a very different way. Like this also was never one of my favorites off celebration rock necessarily, especially like in the sequencing of the album. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's a bit of a whimper of a closer. Yeah, but it kind of works weirdly better on its own, minus the like 30 seconds of fireworks at the end that I was
comes
very
after the house
disappointed by.
that Heaven built. Like how do you follow the house that Heaven built with this? No offense.
It's true. You gotta kind of just coast out after fucking that. And I thought its inclusion on this playlist was very interesting. I mean, there is the obvious, there's like, what is the line like? Oh yeah, like if I had all the answers and you had the body you wanted, would we love with the legendary fires? Like some very obvious coding there. I think, again, going back to the kind of things about like phases that you can be at in your life and in your relationship to your gender, there's this kind of like hopeful weariness to this song that very much hit me in that regard, where it's like, you know, you hit a certain point where a lot of the dust has sort of like settled within you and you just kind of carry on with life. And it becomes this kind of like, it neither gets better nor worse thing. It just sort of like continues to be in varying capacities. And I feel like this song captures that feeling very well, that like, you know, things are all right and that's fine, I guess. But also like, we just keep going with this.
I mean, to an extent, I think it is like symptomatic of the greater Japandroids thesis, which is like a dumb guy idealism. You know, they're just like really enthusiastic about it. It's the kind of guys who would write like, it got me all fired up to go far away.
I do. I might as well share my Japandroids background, which is that I don't have the same one that most of the podcast has, including the people that like Lily and Rose who were on the podcast before me and like were around for Celebration Rock like fever. Like that was not an album that was on my radar at the time. So I
was not into it until like well after everyone. Like honestly, and also I haven't listened to Japandroids like
in a while. So I liked the 2017 album actually, and then I went back and I liked a couple of hits from that. I like Near the Wild Heart of Life, especially the title track. And then I went back and I really liked The House That Heaven Built, obviously, and I liked some of Celebration Rock, but I wasn't feeling like blown away by it like people were describing it to me. But I enjoyed Japandroids and had a period of time in 2017, 2018 where I would listen to them sometimes as a band that I enjoyed. And then I stopped listening to them for a while, and then I trans my genders, and then I went back to the song and I'm like, this song is speaking a foreign language to me. What the fuck? Like I I don't know if it was just that I was living in Michigan in 2017 and still pretending to be a dude, but I guess that I just had different brain chemistry then versus also this is just like not really what I want out of Japandroids either. Like I think this is not a bad song, but like them doing a kind of like a slower, more introspective song just like didn't really land with me. Like I want them to be like going like, all right, we're gonna go double time drums, and like you really have to sell that earnestness with like a lot of energy, and this song is not a lot of energy. I think the lyrics are interesting, and like I totally get why this is included on the playlist as well, even though this is a song that like when I saw it on the playlist, it was definitely one of the higher but you know, I get it. Like there is something like we talked about with Porter, like stuff that is very like hard on its sleeve. It lends well to this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The thing I was thinking about in terms of the chronology that should be important to note is also that like I you know, I was a little bit like James Murphy. I was there with this album. Like it was very much around and paying attention at the time. And had completely forgotten this album did come out as I was heading into my last year of high school. So like that plus the Canadiana of it all again is just like has primed me to like have no objective feelings about this song. I'm like, no, it just hits. Even though I totally get why it would not. And I think I maybe feel a little more like Dudes Rock brackets question mark about
the last time I listened to
Wild
song,
Heart of
like,
Life at this stage.
The last time I listened to like Celebration Rockin' Full would have been like right around their Pitchfork set in 2018, which was like the last week before I came out as non-binary.
Oh yeah, true. I did not have a good time.
That was the last time I could have given in to that kind of like silly, like, yeah, Dudes Rock.
Yeah, I very much did not have a good time at that Japandroids set, as I think I mentioned.
I had a great time, like, because that's the only time I've ever crowd surfed. I was just like, wow, that was fun.
Long story short, I was not ready for Minnesota weed. I severely underestimated it and found myself in the front row of a Japandroid show, not really knowing what to do with my body.
As somebody who has not yet partaked of the local cuisine here, can you enlighten me as to what Minnesota weed does
it's
to
just
MFR?
Jake's weed being
too
strong for Lily.
It was exactly
Shout out to
that.
friend of the podcast, Jake.
Shout out to friend of the podcast, Jake, who did spot me that joint, which I immediately recognized I could not handle, and it was too late. And all we got was like me making a weird, like doing the like when you're way too high, trying not to laugh as hard as your body wants to make you laugh, at AJ doing the iconic pointing at the pitchfork cameraman.
Oh my
thing.
God!
I forgot to invoke it.
I'm so glad that I wasn't there, like personally, because I was gone that day because Josiah and I were on our Mecca trip to Radiohead. But yeah, that I love that I just wasn't there, and I get to just experience that image as a pure just AJ pointing right at the. I mean, I've used that React like 1,000 times.
Yeah,
it's
we all have.
iconic.
I forget about the fact that I am like literally 1 pixel out of the frame in that React, like watching him do that as the camera zooms in on him.
This was before my time. This is before I like knew most of you. This
It's
is
true.
I am God, the
Did I
lore.
like tangentially know you at that point? Because I feel like I might have.
I think they're like Twitter.
Next year,
kinda.
Pitchfork is when we met. Nah.
Yeah. No, but no, Rose and I think were like following each other, and like occasionally we were in some circles because of like Indiehead stuff and like other
That's what I
podcast
was
stuff
thinking.
that fell through.
Like, yeah, because I know it would have been around there. Because like you fucking mailed me a tape.
Oh yeah, no, I mailed Rose a fucking geologist tape at a Panda Bear show that I went to because he like restocked all of them, and Rose was like, they were out of it at my show, or like
No,
they just
didn't
not
even
touring?
have it because it was recorded at the show that I went to. Like,
yeah, that's right. So like Rose and I were in communique, and I like picked up one for her and mailed it to her at that point. That was
Animal Collective Discog Breakdown coming 2022.
It's happening, baby. It'll finally happen. To get back to Japandroids, I feel like I should talk about my own sort of background with them, because I feel like I have a very similar one to Jackie in that like I had known about them through like just Indieheads adjacency for like a few years after I like started kind of creeping on the subreddit, and then it wasn't until like Near the Wild Heart of Life came out, and they were like touring near me, and like one of my best friends at the time was going, that I was like, okay, I should finally do this. I'm gonna go through, I'll listen to the discography. And like back then, like Celebration Rock like really hit for me, and it was funny because when this song came up, I literally did not remember it. It just like exited my brain, because the last time that I had listened to any Japandroids is like the occasional times I've gone back to The House That Heaven Built, just like as its own thing. And so like when this song hit, for me it felt kind of like the similar sort of vibes to where Jackie was, because like when I was listening to this, I was still kind of in my sort of weird, I'm trans, but not really, and like kind of pseudo in denial phase. So I was very much more prone to a dude's rock mentality then. And like, this doesn't really hit for me. I can't remember if this track ever really hit for me. But I do think that there's stuff there, and I think it holds an interesting place in the playlist, even if it's not one of the ones I particularly gravitate to, if not only for the part that Lily is talking about, but the sort of repeated line of the woman in the song being dressed to the nines, which I think is like, I feel like that's a very sort of like recognizable trans mood of feeling like there are things about you, like physical facets of yourself that you want to change, that you really kind of idealize, but also making the most out of what you can at the moment via whatever sort of like ways you can feel at home in your body. And so I think that that's kind of, I feel like there is stuff permeating most of the song, even if I don't necessarily latch onto it in the same way that I latch onto some of the other ones here.
Mm-hmm. In the interest of divulging further Japandroids Pitchfork 2018 anecdotes that have been lost to the sands of time, I do just want to shout out AJ and Jeremiah hand signaling 8.1 at Ian Cohen as he was standing backstage and incessantly chanting it until he saw them and laughed.
I would just like to say that Japandroids less than sign Japandroids beer. They really must be given credit for the fact that Goose Island beer is not only like the best of the Pitchfork collab beers, it might be the best beer I've ever had. I think about it.
I mean,
like
it is the
once...
hops that heaven built.
Never have I wanted a beer so damn much. I am like so bitter that I've heard everybody on the podcast referencing that for 3 years, and I will never know what that sweet nectar tastes like.
I was under 21, but I had like 2 sips. I was like, damn, that's good beer.
I need to try the Deftones beer, speaking of which.
I need to hunt it down. Ever since Jake posted about it in the chat, because we live so close together, Jake also being like around Minneapolis-ish, I've been trying to hunt it down. I went to like the local chain that he said he got it at, and it was not there, and so I have to do like some fucking like actual store locatoring of like ones in the area, which means I'll probably have to drive like 20 miles to get to it, but whatever, it'll be worth it, hopefully. I don't know.
And now let's get to one of the greatest gifts this podcast has ever been
absolutely
given.
Jenna,
thank you for finally putting me like live on an episode to talk about this band.
This is a gift in every sense of the word.
This is one of the most inspired gender songs I've ever heard.
Jenna, I don't know if you know what sort of joy you have unleashed upon the 4 of us, but like this is the one that we are all kind of. This is the one in this episode. This is the perfect song. This is the gem.
I would request that we turn up the volume and that we just listen to a little bit of Dr. Worm by They Might Be Giants, which of course is on the Songs to Trans Your Gender 2 playlist. Why would it not be?
Yes.
They call me Dr. Worm. Good morning, how are you? I'm Dr. Worm. I'm interested in things. I'm not a
the entire time getting ready for this episode, I couldn't stop listening to this. I didn't have to listen to it.
So good.
I just kept thinking, like, as I was like running around, I just kept being like, I am Dr. Worm. All right. This song. Wow.
I don't know how much They Might Be Giants does this, but I want us to bring back the whole like bands doing actually well harmonized gang vocals arrangement. It feels so time and place to me, and I love it so much.
It's so funny because this is one of the songs that like I had like listened to quite a bit before this, just from like adjacency to like people in my life who were they might be Giants pilled. And so this is a song that I had like heard time and time again, but like something about just listening to it for this playlist repeatedly is just kind of like it's a jolt of life. It like really sort of, it's like a sonic defibrillator that every single time I get back to it, I swear just like pumps me up more and more, to the point where now it's just, the first time that I ran through this playlist last night, I was like, oh yeah, Dr. Worm, this is fun. This is a nice, fun, like catchy song. And now it is like, this is the only song that exists in the world.
This is exactly.
This is the metric by which all transes are gendering now. Every trans girl out there is going to their local surgeon. They're like, give me the Dr. Worm. Yes, ma'am. Let's get you right on the table.
I have been deeply, they might be Giants pill. I've always been like, yeah, Dr. Worm. That's like a middle one in the catalog. But I'm just like, this is one of the best ones. This is just one of the best songs. Like, fucking like this, Anna Ang, and like a few others are just like in there, in that immortal place of like, I am gonna have this song in my head forever, because this band just knows how to write a really good melody.
I'll share my history, which is that I have almost no history with this band, and when I saw it on the playlist, I was first like, huh, and then I put the song on, and I was like, huh, and I was also very concerned because I was worried that I was not gonna like the song, and this was gonna be a classic Rose and I opposite tastes take situation. And I listened to it the first time, and I was like, I like this. I don't really get the trans reading right away, but like this is a fun, catchy song. And then I listened to it 2 or 3 more times, and not only did it just completely fucking sink its teeth into me, but also the moment that I realized and listened to, I think it was like the second or third time I listened to it, and you get to the moment in the song where he says, somebody else besides me will call me by my stage name. They will call me Dr. Worm. And then all of a sudden, like, Dr. Worm transforms before my eyes into a trans song about wanting to be called your real name and like wanting to be affirmed and seen as you are. And like the moment that I realized why this song was on this playlist was like the most pure joy I've maybe experienced all week. And then since then, that was the moment that the song just became like the constant running monologue of my brain all day, calling me Dr. Worm.
Yeah, it's funny too, because it was like part of my own sort of working memory of this song was remembering the hook and like some of the like repeated lines, but forgetting that part entirely. And so when I did my first listen through last night, just kind of passively as I was like making dinner for like my girlfriend and I was just like playing the playlist, is like, let me get myself familiarized with this. I like completely missed that. And when I was doing it for the first time today, it like sunk in with me when I was like forced to pay attention to it. And I was like, oh shit, Dr. Worm is a song about being affirmed and just wanting somebody to like recognize you, which is funny too, because like I was also kind of the first time that I saw the playlist, but then like there's something about the insistency of the hook of like, I'm not a real doctor, but I am a worm. An actual worm is itself kind of, I feel like, very trans. Is sort of this idea of like not like feeling like you have to like give a disclaimer about like where you are in like relation to how you came into being, but also like still really desperately like wanting this part of yourself to be true.
Yeah, and like I don't know, sometimes you just want to be a worm and you want to play the drums.
Exactly.
Sometimes your gender is worm who wants to get good at the drums.
That's me. That is me.
That's all it comes down to. That is me too.
I just love like you're talking about like the kind of like openness and vulnerability that like I'm grabbing onto with a lot of these songs, and just the line of I think I'm getting good but I can handle criticism is just so like sweet. I don't know, there's something about it that just like is enormously endearing.
And if we want to like take it all the way, it is such a like early presenting femme in public mood of like,
yes,
I think I'm pretty good at this, but like I get it, you know, if someone
whatever
takes umbrage, but you know, I'm trying. I'll get better.
It's
Dr. Worm.
in that lens, it's like it kind of does feel like a sort of way of like, okay, so I'm at the point now where I've like decided on this aspect of my identity and I've gotten comfortable with like disclosing it to like trusted people. Like I confide in you, like I trust in your judgment. Can you tell me, like, in this like safe space between us, like as people who are talking in good faith, if I am like good at this, what I can improve on, because I want to get better. And it's the biggest transformation for me was when like in the span of a day, this went from like a goofy song that like I had a lot of affinity for into this like really kind of touching song about vulnerability and like showing yourself to another person with like full complete trust and like goodwill in their intentions. It's everything we keep talking about with this song just like is, I feel my heart aching at just every single thing. It is so fucking genuine at what it does.
It's one of those things that is like so beguilingly earnest that of course everyone's first reaction is to dismiss it as a novelty, because like how could you take a song that is saying these things at face value when it is just like so unbearably like vulnerable and sort of pure in like the speaker's exposure of themselves.
You mean to tell me there's a guy named Rabbi Vol?
Let's
talk about Rabbi Vol for a second.
So here's the thing that makes this song beautiful.
Subterranean professional.
Here's what makes this song beautiful is that this song can simultaneously support all of that stuff we were just talking about, which I think is totally in here and is not us overreading the song. But also this song implies a universe where there are all sorts of animals who then have professions as their surname, such as Dr. Worm and Rabbi Vol. I want a They Might Be Giants song about every animal having a profession. I want it to be like a series of children's books.
Check the kids'
Yeah,
albums.
just give me like that version of Wind in the Willows already, please.
I feel like
also the line is so good. When I give the signal, my friend Rabbi Vol will play the guitar solo.
I also want to shout out the line before, when I get into it, I can't tell if you're watching me twirling the stick, is such a just delightfully immaculate innuendo within the context of this song.
Who up twirling their stick?
Exactly.
Who are playing with a Dr. Worm.
I do want to point out the stuff that Jackie is saying about this song definitely having it in there, because I know Rose has it pulled up on the screen right now. Rose, I didn't know if you wanted to get into that quote.
Yeah, I actually wanted to get into a little bit of the like direct they tangents, because I have two. Specifically, first, like John Linnell's on talk about the song, like he says it's about somebody who has an idea of their identity that, you know, other people don't agree with. And specifically, it's about the kind of person who has a fantasy about wanting people to call them a nickname that nobody will agree to call them, and it has an idea of their status that nobody else agrees on. And it's a pretty common problem, you know? Like,
he said trans rights.
Yes. John Linnell, trans ally.
Really?
Yes, a nickname that nobody will call them.
They, them might be giants, more like. It's God. I'm like, every single time I open my mouth to speak, I'm just like grinning from ear to ear just because this song fills me with such delight. I think one of the other things that, like, this is absolutely irrelevant to any of the discussion that we're having, but one of the things that like made me very kind of happy is when I realized that like one of the last little like horn flourishes like toward the end of the song is where it kind of starts stuttering, and like I just said to like my Beatles pilled girlfriend, I was like, is that an allusion to like Magical Mystery Tour? Because it sounds like it.
The Johns love the Beatles. They really love the Beatles.
That is probably what it is then.
I just want to say that I, as someone who is not at all familiar with They Might Be Giants, when I listened to this song and I checked out the album, I was delighted to learn that the last like 7 songs on this album
I wanted to get to.
are called,
I wanted to get to
the last songs on this album are called Planet of the Apes, Return of the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and then of course the last track on the album, This Ape's for You.
This is what I wanted to get to. So they did like 7 ape songs that were all improvised for the shows. And John Linnell's comment on This Ape's for You was we managed to do a whole long list. Not only did we do the ones after the movie titles, but we had a couple. We did a love theme and a song called "This Ape's for You," but I don't know what the point of all that was.
Really, is that not
There's one song that became like a live staple. It's called "Battle for the Planet of the Apes." So how it would work was they would divide the band in half, and then they would like split a line down the audience and tell them like, this side of the room is humans, this side is ape. When this half of the band is playing, you all chant human and everyone else chants ape. And it sounds like this. Okay.
This fucking rocks.
The drums are going nutty
tempo
here.
version of like the Rachel Sydney scene in Rachel Getting Married, where they're all saying the name at the same time.
God. I was gonna say, I don't know what the point of all that was as like an end note. Is a very trans mood of just doing something for kicks and then just going like, I don't really know what the point of it was. I still did it anyway.
At the end of the Pistol Manifesto. I also just want to note that the lyrics to "This Ape's for You" is just 4 lines, and the 4 lines are: "This ape's for you, he's coming at you. This ape's for you, he wants to love you."
Aw.
These guys, oh god, I want to get Giants killed now.
Achingly sincere writers that they can't help but just be complete dorks.
Yeah,
that is the thing. This is like the complete opposite of irony pilling. It is just pure sincerity. Like this
is the tweest shit I've ever heard. Maybe
it's so good.
It's music by camp counselors, and I mean that as a compliment. That's the energy.
I love them dearly.
I get it now.
Look, sometimes you just want to be a real worm, an actual worm who's also a doctor. Like this is just something
not
all
a real
doctor.
Know. Let's get that clear.
That's true. That's true. Thank you.
Not a real doctor does play the drums. These are the facts.
I also just love how it's like so repetitive, but he also keeps finding slightly different ways to say it. Like the very last line, "I'm not a real doctor, but they call me Dr. Worm." Well, it's great. I love.
He gets affirmed.
Okay, next one. Back to the Canada Dome.
Yeah, and now the return.
This is also what we'll call the unfortunately attracted to men corner of the podcast.
I'm left out.
sorry, Nat. This is unfortunately the very brief No Dykes Allowed segment of the podcast.
This is the hetero shame segment.
Yes, this is where we must bear our cross.
Yep.
Yeah, the song is "Your Type" by Carly Rae Jepsen. Mm-hmm. And in case you are not me or Lily and have never thought about how this song might be trans, just the lyric of "I'm not the type of girl for you, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm the type of girl you'd call more than a friend." The moment that Carly Rae Jepsen wrote that, she ruined my goddamn life, is what I will tell you. This is the most like perfect pop song about the specific feeling of like not even wanting to let yourself like be attracted to men because of the fact that you like have this conception that like this person is like that you're just like not even qualified to be considered for this, and how this like very particular insecurity that Carly Rae Jepsen is feeling is like pinpointing the exact kind of insecurity that like hetero trans girls go through. It's just like, I can't believe Carly Rae Jepsen invented the entire Jamie Hood writing career in this moment. Like this is exactly like my shit in terms of how this manages to communicate how trans hetero girls are the only queer straight people on earth, where it's like both that we're straight, but also like we're doing it in this very kind of like timid sort of like I don't even feel like I can put this out there because I'm so worried about not being accepted, but like maybe like please I would do literally like I would trade it all for you, like all that stuff in the song. Like, oh man, this song just ruins me, especially now. Like I liked this album a lot at the time. I was very, very emotion pilled at the time, even though I was still a far way out from realizing that I was not doing a, isn't it crazy that I'm a guy who likes Carly Rae Jepsen? It turns out I was not a guy one bit. And there was other things that I was grabbing onto there, mainly the song, which this song hit me right away. Like I know Nat was saying that this was like not one of the ones for you on the first time, and not even like with the trans reading of it, like just musically, this fucking hook grabbed me right away and was so compelling, and I love the vocal performance of it so much.
It so succinctly captures the sort of complicatedness of this like self-destructive pursuit of something you know you are like inherently exempt from because of something you cannot control about yourself, and yet like pursuing it anyway out of like this reactionary like resentment for that thing that is true about you, which is like not even necessarily a bad thing. You just hate that it puts you in like this other like
exactly
from the rest of the world, and like just shifts the power dynamics such that you are kind of like constantly, I don't want to say on the, like you are on the lower end of this sort of like one-sided yearning that is not really like even rooted in the direction of the yearning itself, but more like, or like the object of the yearning itself. But the fact that it is like this thing becomes this like symbol for your own acceptance of yourself, and when it is denied of you for like no particular reason, there is this just sort of like perpetual pain that comes along with that. I was like reading the lyrics again and tearing up a little. I think like the genius of this song is that the most telling line in all of it is like, "I'll make time for you," which is such a like a small thing, but so indicative of this dynamic of like I will be the one who will like cede precedence to you in an attempt to appeal to you, because I like know the way the deck is stacked against me in this, and like the fact that you have that hold over me is going to like again cause me to behave in like emotionally self-destructive ways, because
it's the whole way that she goes into it, like kind of self-apologizing and being like, I'm not gonna pretend that this is pain. Yeah,
pain, yes.
That this is not gonna work out for me, but like just being like, I'm sorry, I have to do this. Unfortunately, I cannot stop myself from doing this, even though I know you think I'm a disgusting monster. Like that whole internal self-loathing feeling, but like then taking that into this like very anthemic sounding pop song, this pop song that is very much meant to be like blasted on pop radio, and like it just works because Carly is like capable of taking that there, and she's capable of like expressing vulnerability in a very like kind of emphatic sort of way like that. And I think that's what makes a lot of her songs, I mean literally her big hit song is called Call Me Maybe. Like think about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Not like, hey, call me, like it's just like, hey, if you want to, I guess, like that kind of like trans girl timidness that is just so sincere and deep to my heart. Like that's
and like talk about the coding too. Even just like something I'm picking up on for the like more is like just the line of like, won't you come around to the spot that we met, and the sort of like innate secrecy and shadowiness that implies, that is just like so true to life, even though that is not how Carly Rae Jepsen meant it at all. But again, sort of just helps build the most accidentally perfect picture of like, honestly, like not even what it's like to be like a trans woman who is attracted to men sometimes, but like I think in generally just that yearning for that kind of belonging, and that like sometimes you are the wrong type of girl for like literally anything, like that job you applied for, or you are the wrong type of girl for the fucking like getting through the grocery store lineup without it being a whole friggin' thing. Like it does speak to this idea of like, if one thing was different about me, like my life would be so much easier. And I also hate that is the same thing that is like keeping me from being able to manifest these like unrequited feelings for this person.
totally.
And that inequity exists for like no real reason beyond like whatever like label or adjective is applied to me, and not anything to actually do with me. And yet nevertheless it like dictates how I have to live my life, and how I have to like interact with the people I care about and have feelings for.
And just going off of what you said about, like, of course, this is not how Carly Rae Jepsen wrote this song, and not something she even thought about, even though we know that Carly Rae Jepsen is here for the LGBTQ community and will protect us with her sword. but it's the thing that I think is made clear by this incredible playlist, which the thing I love about it so much is not just that the songs are good and that I can connect to them in this way, in the same way that Jenna has, but that they're so unconventional, and they're not the songs that I would have picked besides like Your Type and Something Comforting. Not the songs that I would have picked, but that immediately like I can latch onto because of the way that trans people are sort of forced to find the language to talk about themselves through art that is not about us, and the way that because being a successful trans artist is a thing that has happened for like a number of people that you can almost count them on your hands. So like the chances of you being exposed to a lot of trans art through most of your young adult life is just like pretty rare. And so as a result of that, you have to cobble together a way of like understanding your world through all of these prisms that are, well, this isn't exactly what I'm going through, but if I look at it this way and I like rotate it to this degree, like I can all of a sudden connect in this in a way that the person didn't intend for when they wrote it. But that's what like good universal pop music does, is it allows something for people to project their own life and experiences onto, and particularly with trans stuff, that's something we're all very familiar with movies and TV, and we're just like, I need the My Secret Life of a Teenage Girl robot to be trans in my mind, just for my mental peace, because we don't get trans cartoons characters, you know, and it's like this one is clearly coded as trans, even if the writers didn't know it, so we're just gonna take this for us, and that's kind of the whole
the cube of Carly Rae Jepsen lyrics in my mind's eye
until they become trans.
It's yeah, no, to go off of that point, Jackie, like one of the things that we were talking about in our chat earlier is like this being such a very particular like set of songs that are unconventional and like very much like something that are decided upon by the person who made the podcast playlist. They're very much kind of things that are specific to Jenna's own interpretations. One of the things that I was saying was that we could create like our own sort of 10-song playlist. We have 10 slots to talk about songs that we have kind of latched onto and projected on as like trans songs through our own prisms, our own sort of ways of reckoning with our transness or our genders. And they would be completely different songs just by virtue of like the types of music that we gravitate to and the kinds of like particulars about our trans experiences that like hit us in particular ways, or the way that we like interpret lyrics. Like all of these things like will make this sort of thing a very sort of personalized experience, just because we all have we have commonalities and we have overlaps, because like clearly we're finding like sort of common points of discussion around these, but like the very sort of nuances of transness I feel like are all kind of individualized in ways that I think really kind of make this sort of exercise of cobbling together like 10 songs about transness really different for each person. I do want to say my thoughts about this song, because I know I am the like big dyke among us, so I don't have like quite the same read, but it's funny because I do think this song is very, very good, and I have had a kind of trans reading on this for ages, like since I started like really kind of embracing my gender. But like I think for me it kind of comes more down to like recognizing that there are different parts of your identity that no matter what are just going to they're inherently not going to be factors that involve you with people that you would want to be involved with, and how sometimes you will like push yourself ahead there anyway, just because you don't really you still are dedicated to this person, and you are still kind of like in your mind kind of wanting to devote a piece of yourself to this person, even if they don't necessarily think of you that way. But it's like when I hear this song, I think about like the obvious one being like falling for somebody who's like not into trans people, but there's also like falling in love with somebody who's like not into like your particular type of transness, or like not even the particular type of trans woman that you are. Like there are different ways to kind of cut it on a more sort of like recognizing your own personal incompatibilities with another person that I think for me definitely makes it kind of hit on that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you wanted to, if you wanted to do a lesbian reading of the song, you could just have this be a song about two bottoms who can't date because they're two bottoms.
Well, we made it an hour and 40 minutes before that joke came up. It's impressive for us.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we somehow avoided when we were talking about perversions earlier. So kudos to us.
Yes, there's been a lot of sincerity on this episode, which is I did expect because I am in a very sincere, mushy mood. But
yes,
let's get to these last two songs on the playlist. Unless you have more to say about.
Yes, let's get to the long ones.
Yeah, the long one.
It's a testament to the way this playlist is structured that like the two long ones are both right at the end.
Like it's like the new The World Is album.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, true.
Not enough Josh here.
Yeah, lacking in Josh, but we do have Spencer Krug of Wolf
Parade.
Wolf Parade, not Wolf Alice.
Friend of a friend of the pod.
Yes. Hooray, it's the second too long Canadian one that only I like.
I like it too.
Wrong. You're wrong. It's actually, Rose was unfortunately correct that she's the only one.
I'm the hater here.
Okay.
I like it. I'm in a similar boat to Natalie, who said that they like it, but they don't like love it. Like I really enjoyed it, and the first time I was definitely like vibing pretty hard on it. Like especially I don't know, compared to some of the other stuff here that's like not some people's particular vein. Like this is kind of in my lane, but also kind of not. Like I had a hard time kind of pinpointing, like I've never gotten super into Wolf Parade stuff, and like this is very different obviously, but I liked it a lot. I thought I didn't think that it dragged too much. I think it justified its time. I think the way that it builds slowly was really nice. It just didn't hold up quite as well on like repeat listens of the playlist, just because longer songs just tend to do that in playlists unless it's like a
That's true. And I, like, as I mentioned before, was so into this song, I did not even realize until my last listen of the playlist that it was like a full 8 minutes long. Like, gun to head, I would have sworn this was like 4:30 or something.
It does a really good job of like creating that trance like space if you're vibing on it, like where time kind of disappears, which is what a good long song either needs to feel like 1,000 things happen in the 9 minutes of it, or it needs to feel like one thing is happening that feels like it's a short time, but all of a sudden you're like, wait, I was sitting there for 8 minutes. Like this is that kind of song, the kind of ambient feel of it and the slow build of it. I think it's neat.
The opposite type is the next one.
It's true.
And that my preference is very much for this kind, unfortunately.
Mine too. This is very much like in my bag on a lot of levels, just sonically, and then again also like the Canadian angle with the Wolf Parade thing. And this song I had an experience where, like, you know, sometimes a song by accident eerily, like, very specifically mirrors actual events in your own life. And like, as I started simmering on the trans read of it, I realized that was kind of happening for me with this song. Where it was weird too. This is gonna seem like a very self-indulgent read, but like listening to this song for me feels like hearing a song about me from the perspective of someone who is not me. I don't know how much to reveal on pod about this, but basically just like this song very exactly mirrors the relationship that I was like headed out of as I was beginning transition, like, and the sort of like tensions that simmered within that relationship as a result of my transition. It's sometimes, oh my God, what is the fucking line? There's not that many lyrics in the song. How can I not find this? I think I'm actually reading, two things. I think I'm reading a truncated lyrics page, and also at the bottom of this of the Genius lyrics page is like this note.
Yes, I wanted to read it.
It is not mentioned in the song, but we should
No,
talk
it is.
about that note.
It is.
Oh, wait,
it's
is it really?
It's buried in the like, as the like instrumental swallows it up, there is this recitation that is kind of buried in the mix unless you're like listening to it. But I did want to get to it because I think that's the crux of what I'm latching onto in this. I want to read it in full because I think it is like very worth like touching on.
Yeah, very interesting. I will also say I did finally find the line. Listen, sometimes it's as simple as, you know, you're searching for an answer and the answer is a war, and that's the end of that, is very much my point of relation to the song.
Yes. So I'll build up to the note because I don't want to go right into it just quite yet. I am also a Wolf Parade pilled individual. Apologies to the Queen Mary has like long been one of my favorite albums, and I haven't delved into like any of the side project stuff, but this is one where I don't like love it, but it is like interesting enough that it has me wanting to dive into it, just because I think what it does in terms of soundscape and like really sort of stretching out its sentiments and feelings over a span of time like does work for me. I had a kind of similar experience to Lily where like when I was doing my last listen through today, I was driving home and looked over and was like, this song's like 6 minutes, right? And realized I was at the 5-minute mark of an 8-minute song. Which yeah, whenever that happens is like a nice little thing, especially since I had listened to it a few times already. But to me, kind of the read that I have of this is a sort of kind of tumultuous relationship wherein one person's complicated relationship with her transness becomes this force for conflict and tension, and specifically the thing that stands out to me is the idea of looking through old photos on the floor is with a kind of like frantic sort of insinuation behind it, feels real damn trans in sort of a way that really only like people who have those kinds of knotted emotions about like old photographs of themselves, I think for me kind of like gets across. And that's kind of backed up by this note at the end, which kind of I think really speaks to the idea that there is some kind of like the song is talking about this change over time, and especially a change since the speaker of the song has last seen this woman. So I want to read this in full. Dear Sarah, I heard that you've turned into a goth, and I think that's great if that's what makes you happy. Which is again a very sort of like I support you, but not in that way, as we'll get to with the next song as well. Is I have an old pair of black boots with silver buckles that I don't wear anymore, and you can have them if you want them. Also extremely trans in terms of hand-me-down clothes. Also, I wanted to ask, what if anything is fluttering in your heart? I wanted to ask if it has to be a black crow or a vampire bat, or if maybe instead it could be a kite that has broken loose from the string that you were holding, or the string that we were holding sometime when we were teenagers, or maybe in our early 20s. Could it be a kite which is now rolling over and over on itself in the sky like an unborn baby and slowly shrinking into a dot, and then a speck of black, and then something we're not even sure we're watching, but then for sure absolutely nothing at all? Get back to me about this when you have a chance. I hope you're doing well. XOS. And that to me I think is the pivotal thing. And when I pulled up the Genius lyrics page, because I had heard like the sort of mumbling in the mix when I was listening to it earlier today, but didn't know what exactly was going on. But as I was pulling this up earlier, like that instantly like bumped the song up like several points for me, because I was like, oh, this is the thing that makes it all click together, is this sort of idea of reliving a memory of this sort of tumultuous experience with somebody who you are not particularly like fully on the side of in their transition, and also like hearing these things about like how she's changed over time, and like wanting to reconnect for whatever sort of motives, whether they're of good intentions or of just kind of wanting some sense of control back over it. And it's kind of similarly to Lily is like hitting me in a way that like I didn't expect to, once I sort of pieced together that was what was going on.
All right, well, we've got one more song left to go this evening. And this is one of the real big gender brainworms bands, and we have an expert here on this band to break this down. So Rose, why don't you take it away?
Okay, so next one is Glass Beach with Yoshi's Island. Let me just play a little snippet. Shit.
I'd said this in chat earlier, but like while I have tried and cannot like fully get Glass Beach Pilled, this was always the one for me on this album that like really sort of sunk its hooks into me, particularly because of how just explicitly it's speaking to a very kind of particular trans experience of having these people in your lives who are supportive or not supportive of your gender, and if they are, like supportive of it only in conditional senses, and like having all these ultimatums about like how you should exist and like perform your gender. And like to me, when I was still in my kind of like both pre and early transition phase when this like album dropped, and was like listening to it with like a fearful sort of thing of being still semi-closeted and being like, oh god, like is this like these are the sorts of things I like fear and expect from like different parties in my life. It became the sort of thing where it like really sort of emotionally fucked me up as this sort of knowledge that this is the way that some people peripheral to your life are going to operate or have the capacity to operate in. And that's just kind of there's where I especially like where the song goes is the like very last section where it's the fully supportive party unconditionally, where it's no, I support you for like entirely who you are, and like you do not have to like change or like skew any part of yourself in order to appease me. You can just be the person that you are. And it's that kind of resolution really kind of was doing a lot for me back then, and so I have a very special place in my heart for this song.
Yeah, I think that like Final Run is just like such a very, very tender thing, which I think at times can be a little harder to find in some of the Glass Beach stuff, because like 50% of their stuff is like, oh yeah, this is very fun, and then the other 50% is just like complete gender agony. You just like listen, you're just like, this is horrible.
And that's where this is nice. It cuts the balance where there's a lot of gender agony, and then there is the sort of finding comfort and peace with somebody in your life who is going to offer that to you.
Yeah, I really, this song definitely grew on me over multiple listens, especially as I dug into the lyrics and actually sat with like what the song is about. And obviously this is like, I immediately understand. I'm like, okay, this is why all the transgenders love Glass Beach Band. Like I get that. And I also get it musically. Like I understand the appeal of a band like this that just has so many ideas.
Yeah, it's like post bomb the music industry. Cool.
Basically, my take on this is just that my personal brand of too many ideas is the Fire Tools Black Dresses brand of too many ideas, more so than the Glass Beach Band, just because I've never really been into any emo that could be described vaguely as noodly. That's just never a word that makes me like want to check out music, and this is kind of in that camp. But I will say that like over the course of the song, especially as it gets to like the very kind of pretty outro section of it, I was like vibing more and more as it went on. It's the first section of it that I'm just a little like, okay, this is a little exhausting for me to listen through, but like I really do appreciate. I definitely like this more than some of the other songs I heard on this album, from what I remember of it. I did not really go back to the whole album, but
I just love all the ones that go for like the weird noodly zone outs. There's a lot of like 6-minute ones on this album. I'm just like, yeah, you're either in or out here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've always been kind of neutral. It's interesting that like this album / band / and this song in particular, like I've seen the references to lines in this song so many times, like going around on Twitter. Like it does seem like this was a very time and place kind of like pivotal song for a certain like subsect or sub generation of like internet trans women, of which like, not to pull rank as like Reverend Mother of the Ben Degenerate. But like the dust had kind of like settled on my gender feelings at that time. Like I was pretty much good. And so like I was sort of taking a back seat, like witnessing everyone else kind of like have this moment in their own lives to this song. And so it never like, I think I was a little too far gone for it to ever like really hit me directly. And like sonically, I'm kind of like half in, half out on it. But yeah, I do think it like the phenomenon of this song is such an interesting reflection of the way that like certain things can come around and like hit people at like the exact point time in their lives or like their gender journeys or whatever. And it sort of like transcends into this totally like different emotional connection with it that like if you don't happen to be sort of like within that window within your own life and like with where you're at culturally, that like that's that. But I think everyone kind of has their own like time and place gender anthems, and I like this having its place as sort of like that on this playlist.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely like strikes a chord. Like this album, like I was like getting a little deeper into transition when this thing came out, and like this whole album just kind of hit me like just right, especially like not this song but Bedroom Community, which is like a really great song about like being a really online trans person and finding all your sort of like your real home with other people like in the internet rather than the real world.
Yeah, it's very Joyce Manor, Friends We Met Online for trans people.
I was gonna say like to jump off of Lily's point, it's kind of similar to kind of how I sort of feel about the Ezra Furman track that we talked about, where it's like I feel like where it lands for me is because it is like talking about a sort of thing that like I personally was like bracing myself for like around the time that the album came out. And so for me, it's like, it feels very wedded to a particular time in my life. And I can totally understand how like being further along in like one's own trans journey can make that like feel like more distant for some people if they're not like actively living through it in the moment. So like that is a totally real thing. And I think that that's like a big thing to consider in terms of like, not only like what sort of trans songs people kind of gravitate to or like things that people find trans resonance in, but the specific like acts that people find trans resonance in, because I feel like that's also kind of a sort of the sort of timeline for one's own trans journey can be a deciding factor in how much one can latch on to like particular bands of moments or movements because of that. I do want to say that like, this is, I only kind of remember, despite listening to this album a few times, like a few songs off of here, but this was always one, and I can't recall if it's like because it is more noodly or not, but I like the thing that always kind of like adhered me to it is the sort of the like sing-songiness of like the hook is like one of those like interesting like flow switch ups that always kind of like lodged itself in my brain, and like anything that is kind of like building toward like a big finale like that and suddenly changing gears and like its last minute is something that I always kind of connect with. Like in my mind, you can make a song however long you want if you like throw just like a sudden like fork in the road and just like veer off at like a just drastic angle like late in the song.
Yeah, it's definitely a move that works. And like one of the details I wanted to get into is some like serious nerd shit, which is like the very last lick on the song they do. Just so this is the reason why it's called Yoshi's Island.
Oh, that's the fucking Yoshi's Island theme. Yeah.
Oh. That's why it's called that.
It's like the most nerd shit imaginable, but I love it.
That is something.
I will say that more so than like a time and place thing for me with this album, like my issues with it are purely musical, because I did really like the Home Is Where album from this year. And so like I really like the fact that the fifth wave of emo is just like, let's put the gender pill into emo, and that's the new wave.
Like there's so many like gay and trans bands in this wave.
It rocks.
Like, it's
similar to what we were talking, what Lily and I were talking about with the See Space Cowboy album of like people being attracted to this very dude dominated music and being like, I really like this and can see there's something in here, but also like why is it all of these guys who all talk about the same things and all have this like very misogynistic worldview? Like, let me take this language and use it to express my angst. And like, obviously a very anthemic, emotional, angsty genre like emo is a perfect match for gender angst. It's just that this particular style of emo has never been my thing, even as someone who is relatively like not a super big emo person in general, but like this is the kind of emo that's like, yeah, no, I don't get this.
Again,
with,
it gets
with fifth wave, I can do both. I can do noodly and I can do like angry folky punk like Homer's Where. Both bands rock, and I saw them on a combined bill earlier this month and had a great time.
I was gonna say, Jackie, that kind of speaks to the thing that we've been talking about how like no two trans people's playlist is going to be alike just by virtue of like what appeals to them. And so that's I feel like that kind of gets the heart of like there are just certain things that certain people are just not going to like vibe with, and as such they're not going to like imprint onto in the same way.
My trans playlist would have 100% more midwife on it. That's what I'll tell you right there.
You joke. I started making mine. I'm probably going to post it at least in our chat, if not like the actual like podcast Discord.
I
should do that. That's fun homework.
Playlist will have I know by Girls Ritual.
Oh, absolutely. I'm trying to remember what I threw on there. I know I'm probably my own glass speech cross to bear is I gotta throw a fucking ornamental version on there.
Oh, right.
But yeah, Jesus Christ, my Spotify is fucking up. Somebody else take over for me.
I would just like to note that my one real big gendercore song is of course Recognizing the Enemy by Eve Tumor, which is just maybe the most painful song about dysphoria ever written. Jesus Christ, that song is so good.
Okay, so I had three. The first of which is like obligatory because I was like, I gotta throw an Ezra on here, is Transition from Nowhere to Nowhere off of 12 Nudes, which is like one of the like biggest trans feels of all time, where you just are going between, you feel like you're just drifting along from place to place and don't really know like where you're going. Another which I have on the record before said is very much you're a trans egg and feel like you know something is wrong with yourself, but you can't quite place where it is, and also know that at some point when you do something with yourself you'll be better, is the title track to Source Tags and Codes. Also from repeated listens of the Hannah soundtrack today, I realized that the like vocal theme that's at the end of just kind of starting over and like entering into a new life that you have not really like had before is on there as well. So that is kind of where my brainworms fall.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and make my playlist now for before this episode comes out, so I can drop it. Yeah.
Yes, but
it's a fun little assignment.
I'm gonna take the real quick here and be sappy for 1 second before we end the podcast. Wow, I love you guys so much. This is just the most important little bit of community that's helped me get through the last year is you three all. And I just wanted to say that it's very cool that we got to do this on the podcast tonight, that we got to share this together, and in general that we have each other to constantly do bits with. And like it's just, there's nothing like, I remember when I first came out to Lily and you talked about how just like you meet other trans people and immediately realize you have a language that you can speak, like you can just like telepathically like connect with each other. And that's just like been one of my favorite things about like our friendship, and now being able to do the podcast with you out as myself has just been like a wonderful experience. And so yes, I love you all so much.
Yes, this has been a long time coming. I like truly dearly love all of you, and especially kind of because when we started kind of really commiserating as the trans hive mind of the podcast was when like the pandemic was roaring like in full force. So it was this period of time where it was like I didn't really have the sort of like normal community that I had like locally to fall back on. And so it came to, here are these like friends that I know via the internet who I care very deeply about and really want to support more than anything else. And I feel like I can totally like be myself and let myself be free around all of these girls. And I feel like that's kind of really what it's all about. And like what I think a lot of this playlist is about is like being able to sort of bear the sort of feelings and expressions and sentiments that you feel with your transness comfortably with other people.
Absolutely. And pro tip for all of you out there, don't come out to your parents like days before a global pandemic starts. It's bad strategy. Don't do that. But if you are in that situation, you better hope that you have some cool friends from the internet to keep you company in your year of solitude and pacing. I made it out the other side, and it's my birthday this week, and I made it to 25 years old, and I'm also about to hit my 6-month hormone anniversary. So I am just maximum sentimental, holy shit, I can't believe I'm alive mode right now. So I'm just so happy that I got to share that with you all tonight, because it's been so helpful that you guys got me through this year and out onto the other side, and I really couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah, likewise.
I love the gals chat.
Gals rock. And if you thought the gals takeover of the Indieheads podcast was just this episode, that's the whole thing with the intros. We have taken over the podcast, not just because we represent a now sizable voting chunk on all year-end awards, but just because we have also managed to pill enough of our fellow podcast members who are not trans on our particular pet projects. And now let's just say the album of the year list, folks. Everything's coming up trans, baby.
Oh yeah, our plans are measured in centuries.
Indeed.
This is the year.
Or like 4 years, one or the other.
But if you're listening to this, especially if you're cis, thank you for being a good ally. Thank you for listening. You've done your work for the week.
You do get your cookie. We will give it to you.
But no, seriously, this was a delight. Love doing this with you all. And yeah, tune in again. I believe next week will be our first album of the year.
Yeah, that's the first year. I think it's Pod Awards, then album of the year 1 and 2.
Yes.
All right.
Pod Awards always a fun time. So tune in for that next week. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. And this was very fun. IRL Gals Cast 2023, let's say.
Let's make it happen.
We're finally doing it, baby.
Yeah.
We will link up IRL. We will link and build in real life at some point.
All right, peace out.